Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Macedo. ABC News Live is now continuing coverage as we learn more about last night's mass shooting at a supermarket in Boulder, Colorado. At least 10 people were killed in that shooting, including veteran police officer Eric Talley. Police say they now have a suspect in custody, and we're learning more not only about that suspect, but also about the other victims involved in this shooting. The full list we've received of those victims, as David mentioned, but I'm going to mention them again. Denny Strong, 20 years old. Nevin Studinsky, 23 years old. Ricky Olds, 25, Trilana Barkanaviak, 49, Suzanne Fountain, 59, Terry Leichner, 51, Officer Eric Talley, 51, Kevin Mahoney, 61, Lynn Murray, 62, Jody Waters, 65. Now, again, we just received that list of the victims. At this moment, police are not releasing more information about them, but we, of course, will bring you their stories as we get them. We did learn a little bit more about Officer Eric Talley. He was the first on the scene after those calls came in around 2:30 p.m. He was killed there on the scene in an exchange with the gunman. And we learned that Officer Talley had 7 children, ages 5 to 18. Those are who he leaves behind. The chief actually got emotional as she spoke about this loss of life, saying that Officer Talley had just been in her office to receive an award. This was a close-knit community. Clearly, they are feeling the loss of these 10 lives. We also learned a bit more about the shooter, who's been identified as 21-year-old Ahmad Alyssa. The police didn't release much information about him at the time, but we know that he suffered a leg injury in this attack. He's currently in the hospital in stable condition and is expected to be released to the jail, likely later today. He is facing 10 counts of first-degree murder. And I want to bring in former FBI agent and ABC News contributor Brad Garrett to talk a little bit about the investigation that's now underway. Brad, one of the big things that everybody wants to know and that investigators couldn't reveal just yet is the motive. Why would this happen? But walk us through what is going on in that investigation right now, because one thing that came out clear from this press conference is that there are many agencies working, and according to law enforcement, they are all cooperating really well together. How important is that when you're trying to piece something like this together?
Extremely important, Diane. And what happens is that everybody has their professional lane. So if you look at the FBI, and the DA mentioned this, they're processing the crime scene because they can bring in a lot of evidence technicians on a short notice. The FBI probably will do any technical stuff they want done, but let's say the shooter had a cell phone and it was on him. They'll track that cell phone. Where has he moved? Where has he gone? What stores has he been in? The circle is going to be really tight that they draw around him. The city, county, and state police probably are interviewing people, maybe as well as the FBI. Who is this guy? What drove him to that particular market? Is the market relevant? In other words, does the store represent something to the shooter? Like, did he work there? Did he have a relative or a loved one work there? Or did he just randomly pick it? All of that becomes important in sort of figuring this out. And that's why all these agencies will come together, and each day, at the end of the day, they'll talk about what each found. What did we find evidence-wise? What did significant others say? What did his cell phone tell us? What did he say on social media? He's only 21 years old, sadly the same age as the shooter we had just a few days ago. So he may well be very active on social media. That could be helpful.
And Brad, I know we also heard the special agent in charge of Denver saying they're asking the public for tips for any digital, assume he meant images that people may have captured if they were there or in the surrounding area. What kind of evidence are they looking for on that front, and how much can that help?
Well, it can help a lot. Diane, think about the U.S. Capitol siege. Law enforcement and the federal prosecutors have a bounty of video to look through. And so the ability to see the movements of the shooters, the movement of the officers, and basically a tick-tock of potentially what happened. Because at some point, if this shooter decides to go to trial, all of that information becomes relevant. His movements, law enforcement's movements, law enforcement's interaction with him. I'm talking about gunfight interaction. And maybe verbal, we don't know yet. But all of that becomes important. And people, obviously, there was somebody streaming this yesterday that actually walked in the store during the shooting and walked out. All of that video can become relevant. There may well have been people inside the supermarket that fired up their phones and shot maybe the shooter and maybe other people. So it becomes potentially evidence.
And Matt Gutman, I know you were just there at the press conference. You've spoken to some of the witnesses there on the ground. Walk us through how the community is dealing with this. We heard so many officials today emphasizing the fact that these victims were just grocery shopping, something we all do, but also one of the rare things that we have continued to do throughout the pandemic. So here these people are going to a place, one of the few places where they probably see their neighbors and are able to feel a little bit of routine, and then something like this happens.
And I think it's for that reason, Diane, that it's very possible, and, I don't want to extrapolate too much or postulate, but it's probably the reason that the suspect chose the supermarket, because that's where the people were. And hearing from eyewitnesses, we hear about the specific cadence of the gunfire, that it sounded methodical. It was, the suspect wasn't talking, he wasn't saying anything, but he went about his business of shooting people with brutal determination, it appears. One of the stunning things about this particular shooting, according to police, is that everybody he shot is dead. There was nobody wounded except for the suspect himself, according to police, which is incredibly rare. And I don't know if you all got a chance to watch this press conference, and I've been to many press conferences of all kinds, and certainly after shootings as well. I've never seen a police chief this distraught, shaken up. It sort of encapsulates what this community is going through, how just shattered it is by the senselessness, the violence of this particular shooting. And obviously a police officer who had just been, or his son had just been given an award at this very police station with the police chief just 2 weeks ago. Eric Talley, that officer who was first on the scene and killed, was apparently a CPR specialist, and he would teach it to people, including his own children. And one of his sons apparently saved another one of his children by administering CPR when the child had swallowed a quarter and was getting an award here. So, I mean, that chief just said everything for this community, which is reeling. And for the first time, we've been able to get the names of the victims. But having spoken to those eyewitnesses, Diane, you get a sense of the terror of the moment. They could smell the gunpowder, hear the cadence of that gunfire, and people were rushing towards the exit. But there were also flickers of heroism. The light touch on the shoulder, directing someone to where the exit was, collaborating with the staff and knowing exactly where to go. All of these things ended up saving countless lives, as of course did the quick actions of law enforcement, including Eric Talley, who just leapt right into action and apparently into the line of fire. Diane.
Yeah, we heard the officials there saying that Eric Talley died charging right into the line of fires to save this community that he loved so much. The police chief went out of her way to say that he did not need to work in law enforcement. He had a career before that, but that he felt he had a higher calling to come and work as a police officer and protect the community. So that community obviously reeling now, not only from the loss of Eric Talley, but the other victims here. And as I mentioned, we currently don't know much about them. We've read their names and their ages, but we are going to hear more and more stories, as Matt suggested, of what actually happened in that supermarket and how people helped one another get out of this. And of course, we're going to bring you those stories as we get them. But I want to bring in Pierre Thomas as well, our Chief Justice correspondent now, because Pierre, you say there's actually been a growing concern among law enforcement about mass shootings mounting recently. Tell me about that.
Diane, as we've all been fixated, dealing with the pandemic, there has been a trend in terms of mass shootings, and it's been getting worse. If you look at the numbers of mass shootings as recorded by the Gun Violence Archive, in 2018, there were roughly 377 mass shootings, which is a pretty high number. By the next year, it had jumped to 400 plus mass shootings. Last year, 2020, 611 mass shootings. Those are defined as shootings where 4 or more people are injured or killed. This is something that is worsening. Law enforcement officials deeply concerned because just as we point out that this particular shooting took place in a supermarket, increasingly these lone gunmen are showing up in all the places that we hold dear: the supermarket, Walmart, houses of worship, schools, elementary schools, high schools, the movie theater. So all these places are now in focus of these kinds of shooters. And unfortunately, it's a situation that's worsening, and law enforcement is going to have to try to figure out a way to get command of this situation.
It sure are. It feels like nowhere is safe right now. Pierre Thomas, Matt Gutman, Brad Garrett, thank you all. We appreciate your reporting on this. We're going to take a quick break now, but I just want to quickly recap again. We just got the latest on that shooting over in Colorado in Boulder at a supermarket. 10 people are dead. Those victims have now been identified. We're also learning about the shooter, who is now facing 10 counts of first-degree murder. He's currently in stable condition at the hospital, but expected to be transferred to the jail later today. We're going to continue to bring you updates on this story as we get them, but we're also going to have some other headlines for you right after the break. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. There are some new questions now about that fourth possible vaccine from AstraZeneca. The National Institutes of Health released a statement saying there's concerned AstraZeneca may have included outdated information in its announcement about its COVID-19 vaccine trial, which the agency says, quote, may have provided an incomplete view of the efficacy data. Now, Dr. Anthony Fauci says it's still very likely this is a very good vaccine and that Americans should not worry since there are safeguards in place.
All of this is going to be decided by the FDA. They will independently go over every bit of data themselves and not rely on any interpretation from anyone, including the company.
Still, Fauci calls this an unforced error, saying it was not necessary, and he worries it will likely contribute to vaccine hesitancy. We're also getting an exclusive look inside two of the facilities holding unaccompanied minors who cross the border into the United States. The Biden administration is not letting journalists into the facilities, they say due to COVID concerns, but they did release video from facilities in El Paso and Donna, Texas, where unaccompanied children and other migrants are awaiting transfer to other federal agencies. Only 250 people are supposed to be held here. Instead, there are close to 4,000 crammed in pods. The White House says they're working as quickly as possible to move the children into shelters and homes. And we're also getting a first look at a new docuseries about pop star Demi Lovato. Dancing with the Devil is revealing new details about the singer's nearly fatal overdose and her struggle with an eating disorder. Kaylee Hartung has more.
I'll be fine. I've had so much to say over the past 2 years, wanting to set the record straight about what it was that happened.
This morning, an exclusive first look at the new documentary everyone's talking about.
I actually don't think people realize how bad it actually was.
In Demi Lovato, Dancing with the Devil, the superstar and the people closest to her, opening up like never before.
There were times where I was just like, she's miserable.
For the first time, she's talking about the overdose that almost killed her.
I had 3 strokes. I had a heart attack.
She asked me 2 or 3 times what happened. And I said, Demi, you're in the hospital and you overdosed.
I suffered brain damage from the strokes. I can't drive anymore. And I have blind spots in my vision.
The series sharing unreleased footage from the months leading up to that 2018 overdose.
And I'm just not feeling comfortable in my body right now.
I feel like we got a really clear picture as to where she came from, what she went through, and things aren't always as they seem.
Addressing her constant struggle with body image.
There's just so much pressure as a female in the industry to look a certain way and to dress a certain way. And the stuff that I used to look up to. It's really triggering.
And the lengths her team went to try to keep her sober.
I think if there's one goal with this film, outside of being like the ultimate catharsis for Demi, it's to say to everybody, your journey's unique.
And fans here in LA got a first look at Demi's raw emotion and her honesty last night during a drive-in screening of the docuseries. Kim Kardashian was among Demi's supporters who came out. She says it is a must-see. You can find Demi Lovato Dancing with the Devil premiering today on YouTube. Kaylee Hartung, ABC News, Los Angeles.
Kaylee, thanks for that. And I want to bring in Yale University psychiatry fellow Dr. Amanda Calhoun for more on this. Dr. Calhoun, thanks for being here. We heard there Demi reveals a lot about her drug overdose in this new documentary. So what can lead to that kind of substance abuse? Are there things that we can look out for, particularly when it comes to a young woman in the public eye?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Diane. It's great to see you. You know, when we think about substance use disorders and, you know, honestly, psychiatric disorders, chronic stress and pressure exacerbates those disorders. And so, you know, when you have someone who's under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress, so for example, fame, I can imagine celebrity status, that's going to increase your risk of developing psychiatric illnesses and mental health problems. And, you know, we see that in not just substance use disorders, but it can happen in the form of eating disorders. It can happen in the form of depressive disorders. And so as far as things to look out for, I would definitely say if you have an individual that's under a lot of pressure, that is really not feeling a sense of control, I would be concerned about that individual potentially struggling from mental health issues.
We also heard Demi talking about the pressure that she faced around body image and eating, which I imagine for someone in the public eye is even harder, but I think it's something so many people, particularly women, can relate to. What contributes to that, and how much of that do you think is contributed to by images that we see of women in pop culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, it's kind of two sides to a coin. So I actually recently published a paper about the impact of celebrities disclosing their struggles with mental illness. And actually, if it's done in a way that, you know, is really kind of talking about their vulnerabilities like Demi has done, we've actually seen a lot of positivity come from that. So basically, if you have a celebrity who you look up to, who basically reveals, you know, I've been struggling with depression or I've been struggling with an eating disorder, that can actually lead to people sometimes seeking help for those conditions. Now, on the other side of things, when you talk about body image and women and society, you know, you can't, you know, we don't live in a vacuum. You know, we're people who live in societies and in cultures. And in this current culture that we live in America, there's this thinness ideal. I mean, the classic example is thinking about somebody like a Marilyn Monroe, who, you know, really wouldn't be thin by today's standards, but back then was really considered the ideal. So we've seen models, celebrities, they have been getting thinner over time. And so, you know, we've done some research and looked into the fact that girls who look at images of celebrities who are very thin and respond positively to those images tend to have lower self-esteem and lower body image, probably because they realize that that thinness ideal is not an ideal that many women can ever achieve, and definitely probably can't achieve in a healthy way. And so when you think about the impact of, you know, even little girls in elementary school looking at, you know, what they're supposed to aspire to be like, and knowing you can never really reach that ideal, it can lead to a lot of unsafe behaviors.
Now, we also heard that Demi had a whole team of people around her trying to work to keep her sober and to keep her healthy, and yet this still happened to her. So if you have someone in your life that you're concerned about, either because of a substance issue or because of an eating disorder or any other mental health issue, what's the right thing to do? How do you help that person?
So I think that, you know, it does vary widely depending on the illness, but I would say that reducing stress would be something that would be wonderful, and really thinking about the impact, you know, really thinking about the impact of society on that person, and also thinking about the root of the issue. And so when you talk about eating disorders, struggling and, you know, striving to be thin may be part of it, but it may not be the whole story. You know, the person may be struggling from trauma. The person may be struggling from feeling like they can't really control their life. And so I would really honestly say getting the person connected to, if they're open to it, therapy, seeing a psychiatrist. You really need someone who's trained in this work, meaning in mental illness, in substance use, in eating disorders, to really help you, because family and friends and a team are super important, and support networks are incredibly important. But there are certain things that your family and your friends might do to make the eating disorder worse that they may not know. So for example, talking about, you know, with someone with an eating disorder, for example, talking about food and really talking about calories and restricting what they eat is really not a good idea. And oftentimes, you know, people may do certain things trying to help them to regulate their eating behaviors. And so it just really helps to have them connected with a psychiatrist who knows all of these triggering statements and concepts and things, and will be able to steer the patient and their family and support system away from things that may be triggering to the person that their family and friends just might not be aware of.
Yeah, sometimes we mean the best, but it doesn't always come out that way. Dr. Amanda Calhoun, thank you so much. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me, Diane.
It's our pleasure. And that does it for this ABC News Live update. I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for joining us. And remember, ABC News Live is here for you all day with the latest news, context, and analysis. I'll see you back here at 3 p.m. Eastern with Terry Moran for The Breakdown.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.